let's start with something that is acrid tasting and bitter and disgusting. Of course, I'm talking about Rahm Emanuel. I'm not going to say every one of our problems can be traced back to this guy, but so many of our problems can be traced to this guy.
Yeah. You know how the right is obsessed about the fact that they can say the R word on Twitter now and not get banned? This is the big deal. I remember back in the day when Rahm Emanuel was Obama's chief of staff, he called the advocates within the Democratic Party pushing for single payer effing R word. So that's what I think about when I look at this.
This guy was horrible as a DCCC chair. He's given credit for the 2006 Democratic victory, and I would counter with the fact that leadership was literally harboring somebody who had been identified as like predatory behavior on same-sex pages was enough for the American public. I mean, at one point, I think it was the whip of the Republican Party had to have a press conference and surrounded himself with children so that nobody would bring up the scandal as a way, because like you wouldn't talk about this in front of little kids. And he had an array of horrible candidates. All turned out to be a bunch of blue dogs that all had to self-finance themselves. And so much of the Democratic Party has gone in the way of Rahm Emanuel. When he went to Chicago, all he did was attack the teachers' unions. He privatized so much stuff in Chicago that they're still sort of like reeling from it for years later. I could just go on and on. He was, I think he was with the Clinton administration and was part of their sort of privatization and their triangulation. Just a horrible all-around guy. Everything bad about Democrats is embodied in this guy. And here he is trying to, he literally thinks like this is, I am sure in his mind, like I'm going to help the Democratic cause by throwing trans people under the bus. Here he is on Bill Maher.
I read that the current mayor of Chicago has an approval rating of 6.6%.
Round it up, 7.
I mean, you were just the ambassador to Japan. If that was your approval rating in Japan, they would do harakiri on the live TV.
They would do it at 27.
I mean, what's going on in Chicago as the person?
Look, I mean, we were talking about this a little earlier. I mean, you have also the mayor of New York not doing well. Obviously, other things also here in Los Angeles not doing well, the mayor here. Look, and then you got mayors, like the mayor in San Francisco and other cities that are doing well. So I would say, look, there is a general rule. I had this when I was mayor. Safe streets, strong schools, stable finances. Focus on those 3 things and your city's going to be fine. We've gone through 5 years where people became way too permissive of culture. They were all, which is why everything's
Pause it for a second. Now, you see, the problem he had is he didn't know what point he was making. So he brings up Eric Adams. But then he has to pivot away from that because he realizes, wait, this is contrary to the point that I thought I was going to make here. Eric Adams is not some woke. Eric Adams ran
pro-cop
on just rolling in the cops. So like he's so full of shit, but so determined to make this point that he's going to have to like sort of round the block a couple of times until he sees a spot.
Right.
This is what's going on here.
But I mean, they are, I guess, the 3 mayors he listed, people of color. So they must be woke, right? Even though we all know that Adams was running as the most right-wing Democrat, a former Republican, and there were think pieces about how he's the future of the Democratic Party because he's so pro-cop. I mean, to lump him in with Brandon Johnson, who, his approval rating's really bad now, and he was a more progressive candidate, and Karen Bass, it makes no sense. But he's touting Lurie in San Francisco because Lurie is the exact kind of mayor that Rahm Emanuel is. Very pro-business, neoliberal. He's the guy that's trying to make workers, compelling them to go back to work because he represents Blackstone and private equity and commercial real estate conglomerates that are obsessed with like keeping up their rent prices. So those are the politics that he's referring to.
became way too permissive of a culture. They were all, which is why everything's locked up at Walgreens and CVS, and that is a disaster.
Yeah.
And our school, and I'll say
Pause
this
it for
about
a second.
schools.
I gotta go back. Permissive of the culture, and that's why things are locked up? Like, what culture is it that he's talking about? This is just all such bullshit. It is exactly what Eric Adams ran on.
Yep.
And Eric Adams, aside from being a criminal, is deeply unpopular here.
Became way too permissive of a culture. They were all, which is why everything's locked up at Walgreens and CVS, and that is a disaster.
Yeah.
And our school, and I'll say this about our schools. I don't want to hear another word
school guy.
about the locker room. I don't want to hear another word about the bathroom. You better start focusing on the classroom. And I'm not, no, I'm not. No, I agree. We had the worst reading scores for 8th graders in 30 years. And nobody, not a governor, not a mayor, not a president, not a secretary of education is talking about it. We're all wrapped up. Look, in 7th grade, if I known that I could have said the word they and got in the girls' bathroom, I would have done it.
Pause it. Well, that's the point. He's not trans. He's just some creepy ass guy who would have, basically used Porky's as which is a movie that was like a super date rapey that we all grew up on in the 80s, as his sort of bellwether. Just because you're a creepy ass white cis dude does not mean that trans people have the same sort of disposition and disrespect for other people that you do.
It's a relief to know that Rahm Emanuel is going after the predators here, because before trans people were more out in the open, there was no such thing as rape and sexual assault, apparently. Because
Incidentally,
you need a disguise to do it.
I mean, not for nothing, but the Title IX clarification on bathrooms was issued when this guy was chief of staff of the Obama administration.
Right.
I mean, he's so full of shit. So full of shit.
Also, he when he was ambassador to Japan, had a big to-do at the Hiroshima and Nagasaki remembrance thing, because he didn't show up because Israel wasn't invited. And I'll just say, if there was an issue that really hurt the Democrats in the past year, I would point towards the support of Israel as it conducts a genocide more than I would bathroom.
1,000%.
There was just an analysis
It's
done.
okay to be very, very ID Paul when it comes to Israel.
There was just an analysis done that I think trans issues, rated 22nd out of 22nd
last.
in terms of in terms of voter concerns. They're making this up because he doesn't want to acknowledge the reality that
100%.
his politics contributed to this moment. And then I'm sorry, but when he talks about the culture and includes, if he was just talking about Johnson and Karen Bass, Karen Bass is like a standard Democrat, but to include Eric Adams in that, like, I'm sorry, that sounded very racist to me. It just did. This is a guy who's out there trying to justify his type of corporate politics. Yeah.
And they're scapegoating all sorts of things. And the flip side of this is the Democrats yesterday in the Senate did not provide votes for cloture for a ban on transgender athletes in schools around the country. Now, Trump already issued an executive order on Title IX, and the NCAA responded by changing their policy, essentially banning trans women from their sports. Now, you should know that means that 10 out of the 500,000 student athletes in Division I, Division II, Division III were banned. So now women's sports are safe, everybody. Can't you feel it? And now they have they tried to pass a law to have, I guess, middle school, elementary school, high school coaches inspect the genitalia of the girls on their teams to make sure that their their junk is in the right place for them to play in these high school and middle school sports. And good for the Democrats for blocking this bill.
Yeah, I mean, that just, by the way, as they pretend they care about groomers, you want to have coaches in high school looking at the genitalia of your daughters, of your kids.
It's the only way to protect girls in sports, Emma, is to have the coach inspect their genitalia.
I'm just like transporting my brain back to when I was like 13 and thinking about the violation and like the traumatic, like, I mean, they are freaks. And part of me thinks it's just like a roundabout way for these closet pedos to be able to look at little kids' genitalia no matter what it is.
The party that just last week made a spectacle of the Epstein documents by parading them around, and Jim Jordan, a guy who has covered up a massive abuse scandal at Ohio State, played a Rickroll. You think those people might not be serious about protecting young girls?
They were protecting girls from the point, I'm helped out here with the math, 0.002% of all athletes.
Feel so bad for those kids too, the 10 that just wanted to participate in the goddamn game.
Here's the point. It's not just about those 10. It is about the thousands of younger people who are trans who look at this and get the message, you need to disappear. You need to be disappeared. You need to go away. You need to die.
Yep.
It is about this message that's being communicated to even non-athletes. That's what it's ultimately about. And then we're going to protect girls. And now I look back on it. My daughter played junior high basketball. I can't believe she was able to do that without having the coach inspect all the genitalia of all the girls on their team so that we could be sure that they were safe in playing this game.
This is about control.
And yeah, by the way, we're forcing them to give birth.
This is about controlling who gets to be, because for them, a woman, and this is why this is only the focus on the girls and women's sports and not the men, is because they have this anxiety that they're going to be attracted to a trans woman, and they want to police womanhood in a way that is still within the kind of purview of men. Men get to define essentially what a woman is, and that doesn't get to be fluid at all. You're really only a woman if you get to be impregnated and carry my child, because a woman is of the man's rib. There can't be a trans woman, because what would she be if she wasn't just a vessel for my sperm? That's like where it comes down, what it comes down to. It's very tied to our reproductive rights also being taken away.
And, you know, I have no illusions about Republicans trying to use this as an electoral cudgel, because it's the same thing they did with marriage equality. It's the same thing they did with women getting to use their maiden names. It's the same thing they did with black people getting the right to vote. I mean, on and on and on. But to see Democrats out there pretending that this was an issue that prevented Democrats from winning is absurd. It's absurd.
It's absurd also because in 2022, Republicans ran on transphobia and they got smacked.
Yeah, we know it doesn't resonate.
But Trump was on the ballot this time, and he defies the rules of a lot of politics and turned out a lot of low propensity voters that voted for him, and a lot of lower propensity Democratic partisans stayed home because of the genocide in Gaza, which, by the way, Rahm Emanuel, to bring it full circle, is in full support of.
They'll take the wrong lesson from every midterm. Like they took the wrong lesson in 2022, but also 2018 when.
But this isn't taking a lesson.
No, I mean like emphasizing a lesson.
This is him going out trying to create a narrative. And people need to push back on this narrative because it's a false one, and he's doing it to protect his corporate interests. That's the thing. Just like this, just like the vote against the continuing resolution. Their incentive structure is a function of like, what's going to be more perilous of an action for us to take. And sometimes they need to hear from us to understand that it's more perilous for you to do this than that. Hey, folks, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check out our daily show. We do it every day at 12 p.m. Eastern for about 2.5 hours. We even take phone calls. You should check that out.